Hello there and welcome back to the channel. This is Logbar talking, and today we're talking about something a little bit different. Talking about mouse grips for predominantly shooter games. Now I play first person shooters, but I guess this is relevant to most shooter games. So the first place to start is to cover off who I am, what my experience is, and which angle I'm talking from. So I'm a 31-year-old father of two, and I'm half whispering for fear of waking up my children. So I play video games in the evenings to have fun. I picked up gaming like many during the pandemic and turned to Apex Legends, which is landed on the Switch on the 9th of March 21. So I started playing Apex on PC a couple months later on the 4th of May 21, and I never touched my Switch again. This was the first time I played an FPS game with a mouse and not a controller. So I now have about a 1.2 KD on Apex Legends and tend to stick around gold or platinum in ranked solo queue. So I feel like I'm talking from the perspective of the average gamer. I hope that's enough background so you can place me in your mind's eye. When I started gaming on my computer, I gravitated towards value for money products, as we all do, and the reviews at the time convinced me to pick up the Razer Orochi V2 as my weapon of choice. Noting that my hands are large at about 21.5 centimeters by 11 centimeters, the only possible way for me to use the Orochi V2 was to use a textbook fingertip grip, which looks a lot like this on the screen. You can see the mouse isn't touching my hand anywhere other than my fingertips. I didn't know any different at the time, so I stuck with it for a while until the Logitech G303 Shroud Edition became available in October 21. Given the shape of the Shroud G303 and how it forces to use a strong claw grip, which hopefully you can see on the screen now, and the only point of contact there is in the hump of the mouse, so the back end of the mouse, into the back of my palm. So I found that my aim improved with this mouse as it fit my hand better overall. I spent a lot of time aim training, following different playlists on Aim Labs and Kovaaks, and found that the G303 was more consistent in terms of average scores, and I felt like I had more control of the reticule while using that mouse. When I occasionally switched back to the Orochi, I found that occasionally I would perform extremely well and blow my high scores away, but that on the whole I was much less consistent. In-game, I have a similar experience. More consistency with the G303 and better highs, but more frequent lows with the Orochi. That was until recently when I focused more time on gaming with the Orochi, as I found I actually enjoy playing a fingertip grip more than I do claw, and just because something is safe, it doesn't mean it is fun. So I found that in recent months, my gains with the Orochi have been so significant that I feel fingertip gripping is my preferred and future style of holding the mouse, which is why I decided to record this video, as it may help someone else decide for themselves which style of grip works best for them. And while we're on that point, I'd honestly recommend going to a computer store nearby and trying out the products in hand, if at all possible, before you buy. If it feels good or right, it probably is. Some of us fall into a trap of trying to make our aim fit what we want from it, but I think it's important to see what works best for you, with all preconceptions aside. So, going back to mouse grip discussion, it may be useful to cover a few things with reference to the way I use my arm, my wrists and my hands when fingertip aiming, or fingertip gripping. I tend to use my arm to push the reticule into roughly the right place on screen, and from there I use my wrist to pivot from that position, and finally I use my fingers to bend and flex the reticule into the correct placement, which can mean better control of your micro adjustments or small and fast movements on the fly. fly. So when I claw grip, I tend to keep my arm and shoulder engaged at all times and just use my wrist as a pivot point. So you can see I lose the ability in claw to use my fingers for extra range of motion. So you may now be wondering why it matters if you can use your fingers to extend the mouse on the mouse pad, if you can reach all areas of your mouse pad with solely your arm. And it's a really good question. My only riposte is that your fingers are more dexterous than your arm is. You have many small muscles in your fingers, designed for smaller, more precise movements, versus the fewer and larger muscles in your arms and shoulders designed for bigger, more powerful movements. So the beauty of this is when you practice enough, you don't have to think about it, which is the real reason I turned to aim training, to teach myself the muscle memory of aiming in order to not think too much about my aim in-game. So now I'd like to go over a few of the pros and cons of each style that I've been talking about today. So for fingertip grip, the pros are, I believe you have a higher skill ceiling. Your upper aim potential is, in theory, higher. You have greater ability for micro adjustments. Your tracking and range of motion with arm, wrist and fingers is possible. So for cons, I think it's harder to learn. I think it's also less consistent. And it's difficult with some styles or variants of grip to use side mouse buttons, as it can take you time to adjust your grip after each use. So moving on to claw. For the pros, you have a stable base to use as a reference for aim input. The mouse is always in the same position in your hand. It is more consistent, and the ease of access to the side buttons is great. You don't have to readjust your grip when you use them. So for cons of claw grip, you have to use your arm all the time, and it requires more energy. And that's it. I suppose the final subjective one is, it just feels a bit boring to me. So now as a final passing couple of comments, I have actually pre-ordered the G-Wolves HSK Pro, which was a bit of an impulse purchase, but I'm very excited nonetheless. So subscribe to the channel if you want to see my unboxing and impressions of that mouse when it arrives. And finally, I have a couple clips to share that highlight the different ways I handle the mouse in each grip style. So hopefully you can see when I fingertip grip that my fingers are bending and flexing more so than they do in the claw grip. And I'll have a text on screen so you can see which is which shortly. I hope that this has been a useful video. Ta-ta for now.